Hello, thank you for joining me. I hope you can hear me okay. I've had some problems with the sound, so would be very grateful if someone could confirm that you can hear me okay, please. Thank you very much. Can people hear me okay, please? Oh, hello. Hi, Jean. Hi, Patty. Hi, Heather. Oh, thank you so much. Can people hear me, please? I'd be really grateful if people can just confirm they can hear me okay. Thank you so much for... Ah, brilliant. Thank you so much, Rukia. That's brilliant. I'd like to say thank you for all the incredibly kind comments and offers of support. Jean, thank you. I love you so much, Jean. Thank you so much for your very kind offer. There's been so many pieces of advice that are flooded in and so much information, and that's obviously helped me to inform how we're going to handle this. So I'll just tell you the story where it stands at the moment. So today, which is why I've been a little bit of a gap in updating, today I found out from the consultant that I don't have Lyme's and I don't have a viral version of rheumatoid arthritis. It is something called seronegative um, rheumatoid arthritis, which on balance apparently could give you a bit more of a chance because you don't have the antibodies in your blood, which make it absolutely obvious that you've got rheumatoid arthritis. So there is a possibility that it could be transitory, but it has been incredibly painful. So really what's happened is all the advice that's come in has meant that I've now started some medication. I've had a steroid jab from the consultant. The medication doesn't work itself for 6 weeks. And of course, one of the things to try and deal with this is to reduce inflammation in the body. So we've cut out wheat, pardon me, and we've been making our own bread. Well, Lisa's been making the bread brilliantly. We've been using rye and spelt flour. And that's really good because wheat is something that's not really greatly agreed with me for a long time. So we've really reduced that in our diet. And I think that's been helpful. And then obviously people have been writing in about things like turmeric, which I have used before. So I was using that before the diagnosis was made. So I'm continuing to use that. Fish oils have never really agreed with me very much, although I can eat oily fish fine and love it. But we have actually been using some fish oil, masking it in some kombucha, which makes it more palatable. On the CBD oil, Jean, we have been using that. We've been using a tincture in a liquid, which Elisa's been massaging onto my skin topically, and that has been really brilliant. And also yesterday we had some hemp oil came, which has some camphor in it, which is great because it really spreads around. It's one of the things I found out about CBD oil and also pure cannabis balm or CBD balm. It's not entirely pure. There's usually beeswax or coconut oil in it as well. and some of them are organic, which is great, is they're very, very expensive. So we're doing a bit of a test with this hemp oil at the moment, or this hemp cream with the camphor that spreads over your skin. And obviously Reiki is something that someone very kindly gave me for just over about a year and a half. And that has been tremendously helpful. But I think what's happened is that I take a medicine to prevent migraines that apparently, according to the consultant, has been masking this problem. And so he wants me to stop taking that medicine. And as soon as I cut down a little bit, because I have to come off it in a sort of regulated way, I just really was in so much pain. But first, I'd just like to say again, thank you so much for all the kind support. I'd also like to publicly acknowledge Elisa, the lovely person that I first started talking to about 3.5 years ago. And as you know, we have sort of let people know that we're seeing each other. Well, we have got engaged on the 30th of May, which was wonderful news. And she's just been incredible through this, because my level of incapacity has just been really high. So I can't bend. Getting in and out of bed in the night is incredibly painful. Turning over in bed, it could be my heels, it could be my feet, it can be my knees. Drawing my legs up from the flat position in bed, so I get my feet flat on the bed to then turn to get out to go for a pee, is just like, I am absolutely groaning in pain, and have been for about 4 months now. So Elisa has just been so stoic, so amazing. And I'd like to say a very special thank you publicly to Anissa, who's just been absolutely wonderful. Oh, Heather, thank you very much. We do have some fresh ginger here, some organic actually, that I could have in a cup of tea. There's been loads of ideas coming in like this. I've always been very interested in natural health, but I wanted to talk a little bit today about why this might have happened for me. I got really poorly about just under 3 years ago, and some people may know that my sister Jenny got cancer and very tragically died 2 years ago on the 1st of July. Jacqueline, who's worked with me, who I've known for 28 years, Jack's worked with me for about 25 years. She got cancer and went through a very severe program of treatment. And that completed just under 3 years ago. Another friend of mine and Jackie's, Mandy, tragically died. And also my business partner in the technical side of the business, Pete, his dad sadly got cancer. And so after 5 months of battling that, unfortunately, David lost his life as well. So it's just been an awful lot of stuff going on. People not obviously having the best of times, and you're trying to support them. And I wasn't great myself. And it all started just under just under 3 years ago, about 2.75 years ago. So I wanted to tell you astrologically what I think this is about. So there's a form of astrology called directions. Now, directions is different from transits that most people have heard about. So we have a natal horoscope, which is the information contained in our chart when we're born. And then as we go through our lives, the planets are moving, and you may have a transit affecting planets in your natal horoscope. And obviously, one of the biggest things that can happen to people is anything to do with Saturn. So we can have at 7 years of age, 14, 21, 28. So we're getting the Saturn effect in our lives in a big way. And those transits are incredibly important on the natal horoscope. But I think directions are actually much more powerful. So just under 3 years ago for me, Pluto had moved to a position where it was squaring my sun in my directions. So what are directions? Well, directions is a relatively modern form of astrology. I say that relatively because obviously astrology is so historical. And there are some really big exponents of this. One of them is a chap called Noel Ty, who used to be an opera singer. And Noel is an incredibly enthusiastic person for this way of looking at things. And it's very simple. And essentially, what we do is move forwards a person's natal horoscope 1 degree for each year of their life. So every planet moves forwards. So if you look at where Pluto was when I was born, it was about 1 degree in Virgo. So at that time was about 57.5 years. If you take it forwards, it had got up until about 29 degrees Libra. So what you got was what's called a disassociate square with my sun, which is 0 degrees Aquarius. So Libra, obviously, and Aquarius are both share the same triplicity, which is air. And you would think, well, that wouldn't have an effect, but actually that is a square. And then, of course, it stepped forwards, and the intensity of that square really began to be felt. Now, Pluto, as you know, is hugely influential. Some astronomers will belittle astrology by the importance that we give in Pluto. They say it's not fully a planet. And my joke, of course, is you can call me Sheila, but I'll still tell you the same things. So Pluto still has the same influence, whatever it is called. So Pluto is about the underworld. It's about hidden opposition. It's about betrayal. It's about vengeance. It's about death. It's about transformation. It's also about rebirth. It's about money. It's about lust. It's about a lot of very powerful things. And of course, it's the modern ruler of Scorpio. So what happened was then the square became absolutely nailed on exact. And I became very ill. So this is 2 3/4 years ago. Now, for me in my natal horoscope, so we're not talking about sun signs here, that meant that Pluto was in my first house, which is the body, and the sun is in my third house, which controls circulation and the nervous system. So basically, I became completely and utterly exhausted. And this was precluded by a virus that I got. I got a cluster of herpes spots around my mouth, which lasted about 6 weeks. I'd had them a few times in my life, but maybe for 2 or 3 days, and they'd make way. But this just went on, and I became very weak in my body. And then it just got to the point where I just was really struggling to work. So unbeknownst to yourselves, I was sort of lying in bed a lot, getting out of bed, doing videos dividing videos into 3 sections. So I do the first section of Aries, the second section, the third section, then climb back into bed. And this was all going on then. And then obviously there's a recovery from, well, there's not the recovery, there is the advancing moments in my life when I lost my sister. And that is very tragic to watch someone go through what she did do. She was incredibly brave, a fighter of fantastic proportions. But I have to be really honest about it, and this is the first time I've ever mentioned this fully openly. There are a lot, and have been a lot, of politics in my family. And these influences led to me being excluded from a wedding because I made comments about the lack of support that was given to Jenny when she was in the hospice, which was for 9 weeks. Really not nice stuff. I'm not going to name names or anything or people's roles, but it was really upsetting stuff. And then there was a series of exclusions that followed that, which I found to be profoundly difficult, because basic karma that I have in my life is that I have the sun, of course, in the third house of Aquarius, but I have Venus and the moon in the fourth house alongside the IC, which is of the opposite of the midheaven. So obviously about family, the midheaven is about how we interact to the world at large. So the IC is all about how we interact with the family. So Venus and moon on the IC in the fourth house makes me love home fiercely, love peace quiet, tranquility, love a calm environment. But they're also next to Chiron. This is the big giveaway about my karma in my life. So Chiron, the wounded healer, next to the moon and Venus, but the key is that the moon and Venus are opposed by Uranus. So Uranus is in Leo, so Uranus rules astrology in the 10th house, so it's not really a surprise that I ended up being an astrologer. And but in an opposition to the moon and Venus, it can lead to unusual relationships. I'm very much into friendships. I don't have huge amounts of friends, but the friends I have, I'm very protective and proud of, and they've lasted for years, my friendships. And in my family, my relationship with my son is absolutely beautiful relationship. We have a very, very close relationship. Jason, who recently got married to Christine, and it was just glorious, fantastic Christian service on both sides for them both. They're very much into that, and I very much believe in God as well, and so that's all been wonderful. But in the rest of my family, the pattern over the years with my mum as well, sadly, was that I kind of ended up being my mum's counsellor. Now, I love my mum very much. We celebrated her 97th birthday on the 9th of July, but my mum actually left this planet on the 14 years ago. So it's a Saturn return of when she left this world. And in the last 5.5 years of her life, I'd go to see her every couple of days, massage her feet, trim her beard, clean out her nails, give her loves, tickle her, give her flowers, take her tissues and fruit, try to make other people laugh, and gave her everything I could. And sadly, when my mum did die, and she had Parkinson's disease, and then she also had a fall about 2 years before she died and dislocated the shoulder on top of her dowager's hump. So she lived the last 2 years of her life in absolute, abject, total pain. And that accident was actually avoidable, but it did happen. But when my mum sadly passed, I slept on the floor the night before she passed in her room. When she passed, it was a while before the doctor came, so she went into rigor mortis. She was only tiny anyway, so they had to put her in a big body bag, and I carried her to the hearse because I felt that was my duty to help her reach the end of the journey on this life. So I love my mum very much. She was very kind, a very good sense of humour, but my mum was quite a needy person. So her point of call, if she had issues with my sisters or my aunties, was always to ring me up. But my mum wasn't so interested in me, not really. That's a very public thing to say. It's a painful thing to say, but it's the truth. And one of the issues with Chiron being conjunct Venus and the moon is that I just feel people's pain. I can walk into any situation and feel the atmosphere very acutely. But of course, as you will know, because many of you will be very fine empaths yourselves and very kind people, you'll know that you can walk into a situation, you soak up all that energy. One of the downsides of that is that we can become overloaded with that more negative energy. So, but it wasn't a pattern of people coming to me with their issues. Just with my mum, it's happened all through my life. It's almost like I've got a day glow sign on my forehead that people always tell me their problems. And of course, that's an enormous privilege, and I'm very humbled by it. But that was repeated by other people in my family as well. But the wounded healer bit comes in, that they just weren't interested in me. That is my history. And I could write a book about it. I could tell lots of stories. I don't want to, because I don't want to go down that route. But there are some issues of why, when I got round to nearly 60 again, you know, after losing my dad also to lung cancer when I was 8, and watching him be very, very ill for a long time, coughing up blood and green gunge, that was an enormous loss for me. And, you know, basically I wasn't allowed to grieve. People didn't like my dad in the family. I love my dad very much. His moon was conjunct my moon. His sun was trine my sun. So you get an idea of how well we would have got on. And my dad is 99 now, but of course is not on this planet. So there's been a sort of history with me of being very sensitive to other people, but very frustrated, if I'm honest, about the lack of support and maybe awareness to my situation as well. And I think this has meant that I have absorbed a lot of energy inside my body. So if we think about inflammation and rheumatoid arthritis in a more Louise Hay kind of way, or a Charles Wright kind of way, which is like a Christian healing, it's very much about you're absorbing shock and frustration and unhappiness deeply into your system. That's not good for your bones, it's not good for your muscles, it's not good for your joints. So I got really ill and I carried on working, and the business as it has been for, well, I can't really quite remember when it did start. So how old would I have been? It's probably when I was about, just trying to think. I think it started when I was about 37, 38. And typically what I tried to do from the outset was offer as much content as possible for free. And of course, what's happened because of Google's greed, because of them buying out YouTube and changing all the terms and conditions. So what I was earning, 2 or 3 years ago, $1,200 a month, it's now about $300 a month. You still have to put the same amount of effort in. I'm not the only content provider that's been affected by them. They've stopped people having click outs from the video to your own website. That's reduced traffic. And now their latest thing is that if your video is relatively short, which mine tend to be, they're penalizing people for that because they say that longer videos equate to greater quality, which is not necessarily true, because you can say a lot in quite a small number of words. So there's been that, and then of course on the Google side of things, they've changed algorithms constantly, which has affected our rankings. And also now they've put ad blockers onto Chrome, which is the most widely used browser in the world. It's about 50%. About 10% is IE. The rest are various other things, including Firefox. And essentially, that's hugely affected the business in terms of revenue. Whether you support Brexit or not, if you're from the United Kingdom, ever since it happened, the vote, obviously the pound plummeted, so interest rates have been low, but imports have become more expensive. So all raw materials for food and the rest of it have gone up in price. So everyone's less well off at the moment. And that's meant that some of the premium services that we offer have not been used quite as much. And obviously these are services that, I have provided on a shared basis. So the revenue has dropped hugely. My energy levels dropped hugely. Pluto square the sun. Let's assess what this is. So the directions, 1 degree for each year of your life. So Pluto squaring the sun. Well, I think that square can, if I'm honest with you, be where something just comes to a complete end. And you can also lose a respected older relative under that aspect. So those two things definitely happened. Health broke down, lost my sister, whatever the circumstances, and she went through a very difficult time. And then there's the mourning. You try to do your best, and then perhaps other people's view of my actions as not necessarily being as I've meant them to be. There's been some heavy stuff going on, which is very platonic indeed. Now, of course, then the miracle happens, which is a year ago, that Elisa and I, who started to work together in the May, finally met in August on the 4th. Well, we actually talked all night on the 4th, sorry. And then on the 11th we met, and it was just quite extraordinary. because I'm a very cautious person. I've got Capricorn instincts because that's where my Mercury is in the 3rd house, which trines that Pluto position in my natal horoscope. So it makes me very wary, very cautious person. And obviously there's a big age gap. And then we had to do the whole thing of checking out, well, was this, you know, just something? Well, no, it wasn't. It was something quite profound. And one of the reasons I was able to work out it was quite profound was another form of astrology called Draconic Astrology, which again may be something you've heard of. Draconic is basically, it's the Greek for the dragon's tail, so the dragon's head, sorry, in terms of the north node, and the dragon's tail in terms of the south node. So what one does with a Draconic chart is take the ascendant from the north node. If you compare Elisa's Draconic chart with my natal chart and her Draconic chart against my Draconic chart, there's just so many connections. It's just absolutely extraordinary. And I'd love to be able to share the wonderful insights of Draconic charts with you more widely, and that's one of the things I feel I need to do if I'm going to reborn or rebirth this whole situation. So Draconic basically is about our soul, whereas the natal chart is about who we were given, or the influences we were given when we were born. Of course, we have the choice to evolve and continue to learn and sometimes move past more difficult aspects. But the Draconic chart is our soul. Now, I'm going to tell you some things here that might not surprise you. So obviously have the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, and IC, and the North Node, beg your pardon, and Chiron, all in Aquarius, which is detached, it's airy, it's friendly, but it's not very intimate. But two of them, or one of them, is in the 3rd house, which is the sun, which is very chatty and has a kind of Gemini feel to it. But all the others are in that very sort of reflective, quiet, sensitive 4th house, which is very much like Cancer. So here's the piece of news that might surprise you. In my Draconic chart, my sun is in Cancer. I don't think that will surprise you particularly. My moon is in Gemini. I don't think that will surprise people who know me, because maybe a bit bright and breezy, haven't necessarily been ready for a massive commitment such as I've made to Elisa before this point in my life, even though I've had some very long and very sincere relationships with some amazing people that I'm still very, very close to. But Elisa was the one, and we basically knew from our own instinctive, because of her background, what she does. She's an extraordinary person for her age, and I don't say that in a patronizing way, because she's got a 1st-class honours degree. She's very strong-willed, but there are things that we obviously learn as we get older because we have experiences, but there are also knowledge that people can have. And I think Elisa is one of those people. Well, we have a bit of a joke actually, because she says she's been here for centuries and centuries and centuries. So I tease her and call her Old Father Time. So we have a good laugh about that. And she says, well, you've only been on the planet for this 60 years, so you're just a kid compared to me. And that's great, because that keeps me very much humble and feet on the ground. So I've got a real equal partner here who is just amazing. But we were able to tell from our own instincts, from communication, from testing things out, from learning about each other. Like all relationships, we've had our bumps in the road. But that Draconic comparison between our natal charts and the Draconic charts was just absolutely breathtakingly insightful. And it was all the way down to like looking at midpoints, where her midpoints were, my midpoints were, between, for example, the ascendant and the midheaven on hers and mine, and also between the sun and the moon on hers and mine. And there was just so many connections, quite extraordinary. So going forwards into what this new situation can be, obviously at the moment I'm not very well. I'm finding it very difficult to get in and out of bed. The toilet is a major problem. Sorry to be so open about that. Getting my pants on is a major problem. Elisa got me a grabber, you know, one of these litter things, but I haven't got the strength in my hand to pull the lever. But I found it's quite good to scoop. But you know, I see this as a real opportunity to grow, because it's taught me all sorts of things about opening things. I can open things with my mouth because I can't get pills out of the packets in my hands because it's too painful and really strains my stomach, believe it or not. So they're all different techniques that I'm learning already and adapting. So when I was making dinner on Sunday, I was sat in a little chair, but hooking things out of the fridges under the counter using the broom, and then using the sort of grabbers that you get a boiled egg out of the pan to pick anything up off the floor. But movement of any kind is just excruciatingly painful, and it has been for what, best part of 4 or 5 months. But the thing that has been improved is the steroid has brought the ankles down. I've got quite slender limbs, but my ankles were like just so large. The steroids have brought those down. So with crutches, we're able to walk around the block now. It does hurt my feet and it does swell the ankles up a bit, but at least I can do it. And also in the house, obviously I can't use the crutches in the house because it's a 4-story house and it's quite a narrow house. It was built in 1846, but what I do is lean against the wall as I go down the stairs, and I just go 1 step at a time. So everything is agonizingly slow, painful, but we're banging all the goodies in, all the great advice I've had. You know, some of it I knew about and was doing, some of it I didn't, and I'm so humbled by it. And the kind comments just mean absolutely everything. But I wanted to just tell you about another couple of things that have happened this year in terms of the planets. So where Pluto, that directed Pluto, is up to now, it's now moved forwards into Scorpio by 1 degree, and it's still squaring my sun, which is 0 degrees Aquarius, because I allow for about 3 degrees in terms of transits. So this directional square means that the pressure's still on to change. Something's breaking down in my life, but you can see there are other things building up in an emotional context in the most wonderful, beautiful of ways that I could never have perceived could possibly happen to me. And so what's happened this year? Well, 2 massive changes. In mid-May, if you remember, Uranus moved out of Aries, where it had been since 2011 for 5 months, and then full-time since 2010 for 5 months, 2011 full-time, and it moved into Uranus. Now it's going to be there until the 6th of November this year, and then it will come back on the 19th of March next year. Now, what is Uranus about? Now, you can imagine I'm quite a Uranus kind of character with all that Aquarius, Uranus in Leo. I'm not going to really hide the fact that I have been a bit different along the way. And Aquarius, obviously, being an astrologer is part of that. But that Uranus change, that switch, that transit on the 16th of May coincided with Mars moving into Aquarius. So Mars moved in to be exactly conjunct my sun. And guess what? Uranus is exactly square both my sun, my natal sun, and the transiting Mars. So what you've got, Mars square Uranus, is a lot about frustration. It's a lot about inflammation. It's a lot about a desire to break away from any restrictions. Now, in actual fact, in terms of my natal chart, I'll just check where the just looking where the, in terms of Taurus. So essentially, yeah, essentially it's in my 6th house. Sorry, I'm coming back. I do apologize. So Taurus moved into my 6th natal house with about health, but obviously it had been there already in Aries. And so already it was kind of like calling out to me that maybe there needed to be some changes around work, life structure, organization, diet, vitamins and nutrients, all these kind of things. And Uranus, of course, is about enlightenment. It's about new ideas, but it is also about, in some situations, about breaking down what is already there. Now, I remember when Uranus moved from Pisces into Aries in 2010, and I watched a video by an astrologer saying it was going to be the most amazing transit. It's going to be all these amazing things happening with Uranus going through Aries. And I've got to say, I was aghast, because if we think about it, Aries energy is about action, and action in a very impulsive, instinctive way, which is what makes Aries energy brilliant, because it doesn't weigh up all the pros and cons. It just thinks, let's go for it. And that's what makes things happen in the world. Things would never get off the ground without Aries energy. It's the start of the Western tropical horoscope, and it's all about new beginnings, new energy, initiation. It's a wonderful energy. But you put Uranus there, and it's almost like pouring paraffin on a fire. And of course, what we ended up with was the Arab Springs, which on the face of it all looked wonderful from a Western perspective. But in Iraq and in Libya, if you were gay, if you were a Christian, if you liked alcohol, if you were a Coptic Christian particularly, you were left in peace in both those states, as long as, of course, you didn't fall foul of the horrible regime of Saddam Hussein and the horrible regime of Gaddafi. But what happens with liberation that comes through Uranus going through Aries is that it breaks everything up, a bit like happened when the USSR came to an end, and you have a complete power vacuum. So what we've ended up with now is complete chaos in Libya, complete chaos, massacre in Iraq. We've got a breaking down of the Kurds' needs are not met. There's a lot of radicalization going on. It's an awful situation. So Uranus going through Aries has not been a walk in the park by any means at all for any of us in lots of ways. And of course, we've had lots of things like, you know, Crimea, we've had Syria, which has just been the most dreadful war. And action we could have taken at the early part of that war, we didn't because of the mistakes that were made in Iraq. So we've really sort of not managed these situations particularly well. And it's meant that obviously there's a lot of refugees flooding into Europe and America, and that's become a massive topic for a lot of people. But the Western world has to take a bit of responsibility, in my view, thinking, oh, isn't it wonderful? These people are liberating themselves from these awful people. It wasn't quite as simple as that. Sorry for the idealistic sort of rant there, but it wasn't quite as simple. I'm not saying those regimes were great. They weren't, but it wasn't quite as simple. And of course, if you are homosexual, or if you are someone who likes a drink, or you are a Coptic Christian, even in Egypt, and Coptic Christians were way before the Roman Catholic Church by about 400 years. These people have been slaughtered, and just awful what's happened. So Uranus in Aries has been a very hot, furnace-like, ignitionary kind of, sorry, I haven't said that very well. So what we've got with Uranus moving into Taurus, of course, it last happened in about 1937. It left in about 43, I think. And we all know what happened at that time. If we're older, sorry, in terms of it probably was something to do with the Second World War. Because Uranus at the end of the day is about stability. It's about liking regularity. And Uranus is about shaking things up, not necessarily always in a good way. It's almost like we can leave any situation, or we can be very outspoken. We can say what's wrong. There's a lot of hate speech these days, isn't there? And a lot of people are being abusive and saying this, that, and the other. What we all need to do collectively is think about, well, what are the things that we can do to make things better? improve things. And in that sense, Uranus can be so amazing because it's innovation. So we may find that there could be innovation about fossil fuels, for example, because obviously the Earth rules Taurus, what we get out of the Earth. So there may be a greater speediness, I think, once Uranus does go into Taurus full-time next year on March the 19th, towards electric cars. I think, you know, also Taurus is a lot to do with materialism in some ways, or stability. So Uranus may challenge that in some ways. Are we too much? I'm not saying collectively ourselves as a group of people, but are we as a world too caught up in the chase for materialism? Uranus and Taurus could challenge that. But from my viewpoint, it's in my 6th house, health, squaring up with the sun, squaring up with Taurus, with Mars, transiting Mars, my natal sun. But guess what? It's opposite. It's opposite Pluto. Pluto, directed Pluto, opposite transiting Uranus. It's just so powerful. We're talking about something that's just not working, whether it's my body, my emotions, my family life, my business, my finances. It's just something has to change. And if that's resisted, as we all know with Pluto, if we resist Pluto, it can force change on us. But of course, it's forging a very powerful T-square. So you can see that this inflammatory illness really started to pick up in the early parts of May. And but the doctor said, because of this medication that I take that has been suppressing the symptoms, even though I've been very, very stiff and getting worse for about 3 years, that you know, it's been building up, and that's really when it took hold. And Mars was squaring up with Uranus in the first, well, I think it was the 2nd week of May, but at that time Uranus was in Capricorn, and Uranus was in Aries, and Mars was in Capricorn. And then, of course, they moved on the 16th in the same day. So I had a T-square with that hugely important directed Pluto, life and death, huge changes around my body, the 1st house, my identity, my whole personal being, my life. You can lose your life with Pluto. You can. It's a fact. So that was opposed by Uranus, which is about the desire for instant change, agitation. Squaring the sun, which is in the 3rd house, 6th house square, is about trying to do too much, overloading our system with too many tasks, trying to be too efficient, pack too much in. And of course, Mars is there as well, saying, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not happy about this. I spent all my life being a listener for other people. And Mars in Aquarius is saying, you know, I want more recognition. So I have become a bit more outspoken, especially within my family, about my needs. Whether the messages have been heard or not is another matter. And of course, what you've also seen is I've come out from this timidity that's been there for absolutely years, and this very private person. So I'm actually speaking out about my health, family politics, work in a way that never ever done in my whole life, because you know, this is a role that I've done, that we've tried to attract as many visitors to the site as possible, that I've tried to be a decent person. We try to answer every single comment, email that we get in a decent way, but I haven't connected with people necessarily on a direct basis, partly because I can be intentionally shy, which may be surprising, but it's true, and partly because I have been particularly exhausted the last 3 years as social media has moved in the direction of revelations. But there's something else I haven't told you about, and that is that 6 years ago I was identified as having 2 types of sleep apnea. Obstructive sleep apnea you will have heard of. The tongue falls back in the mouth. It's very common, especially people middle-aged, especially people with thick necks, known as a goiter, or perhaps a bit overweight. Quite often people who smoke or drink or snore a lot, which I don't think I do. But it was my dentist who actually got me to fill in a form, and I really scored badly on this form. It's to do with munching your teeth in the night. So I thank her very much indeed, Kate, who has looked after me for about 14 years, because I've been poorly. I haven't seen her for nearly 3 years, which is terrible because I used to go every 3 months. So I was referred to a consultant, and they ran a sleep test on me. And when I first saw him, he said, "Well, I don't think you can have sleep apnea. You don't drink much, not particularly overweight. You don't, seem to show any of the signs of it." And it came back that I had 2 different types of sleep apnea, and one of them, central sleep apnea, is actually quite rare, and I probably had it since I was a child. So I used to wake up as a child choking, screaming. So it was all put down as being obviously psychological. My mum had exactly the same symptoms, bless her, and I think that drove her Parkinson's illness. And of course, the technology that exists now didn't exist then, and it's really, in Britain anyway, only really come in the last 10 or 15 years. So I now use CPAP technology. So each night I wear a full face mask. Not many people can handle this stuff. It's about a 40% adoption rate, but it is an absolute lifesaver, because for every minute I was stopping breathing 24 times for 30 seconds of time, which doesn't sound very much, but essentially what happens is it stops you from actually having proper deep sleep. So you have your rapid eye movement sleep is absolutely ruptured all the time. So all through my life I've been exhausted. So at school I'd be falling off my perch in the afternoons. As an adult, I could never wait to get home from work and just collapse on the settee. Since I started this business, I would sleep on the settee every single afternoon, and if anyone rang me, I was completely out of it. And sleep apnea is a very, very serious condition, especially central sleep apnea, because it's not very well recognized. And essentially what it means is the brain and the lungs don't communicate very well with one another. And so I've got the kit now. So where I was having 24 apneas a night, last night it was 4.3. Now that was a bit of a bad night. It is affected by whatever's going on. It's been very hot here in Britain recently. It was a bit cooler last night, but obviously if there's anything that's on your mind and stuff, it does affect you. But it can be lower than that. Say it's 1.3, so that's each hour I'll stop breathing 1.3 times. I'm a different person. I don't sleep in the afternoons anymore, but I still suffered with this overall wear out from doing this job, doing all these videos, chasing all these views, trying to obviously be decent to everyone, dealing with some fairly major exclusion issues in my family that have gone on many, many years. And yet at the same time, whenever any of the key players had issues in their life, they'd always come to me. So that was the pattern. And I think I've really come to terms with that now and started to let go of that and actually seen what a gift it is. Rather like it's a gift that I've got this rheumatoid arthritis, because it's helping me to understand what it's like to be in tremendous pain. There's so many people who are in tremendous pain. I understood profoundly about people with sleep issues because of the problems that I'd had. And now it's given me an insight into people who can't put their knickers on without help, or have to use little groovy devices to do it, or when can't have a bath because they can't get in and out of the bath. And I'm actually quite an agile person. And until this really kicked in, well, I think just before this kicked in, Elisa and I did 65,000 steps, because we just love walks, love urban walks. We live in a small town, a historical town. It's a beautiful town with lots of rivers and tow paths, obviously, and old canals and historical buildings. And whether it's in the snow that came down, it was just magical. It was just straight off a Dickensian set, walking around the centre of Old Shrewsbury with all the Georgian buildings, or whether it's been as the weather got better. But my feet were getting sore and my ankles were getting more swollen. And I've actually had 14 health appointments now, because initially, and this is absolutely no criticism of doctors at all, because I've got the most lovely doctors, and they just didn't understand my symptoms, because I had pain under my ribs, I had pain in my hips, my ankles were horrendously swollen, my wrists and hands which, as I said, I had some amazing help with, and I'm very grateful for that help. But it's also my shoulders. Can't push myself up out of bed. My buttocks, just the pain is just absolutely universal. And because of the swollen ankles, I couldn't walk. So then, of course, you're not pumping the blood around your body. You're not feeling very well at all. And then, of course, there's the inflammation. So that has to be dealt with some pain relief initially, because I can't take ibuprofen, because I've got another health issue to do with my digestion called Barrett's esophagus disease. So I can't take ibuprofen to reduce the inflammation. I could take sulfadine, is it? The consultants recommended I could take that because it only has about 8% codeine in it. But I did take it once last week. I was just totally, you know, I just wasn't here. So I'd rather have the pain, to be honest, and take the paracetamol and just be compos mentis. So we've been dealing with an enormous amount of issues. There's 14 people involved with Patrick Arundell Astrology, which might surprise you. We've got some amazing content writers, just people who've been with me for absolutely years, who are so loyal. The Keepins in Kent, brilliantly creative, imaginative astrologers who know so much about fixed stars, and wonderful people. Helen Adams, gifted, beautiful person. John, who writes the Chinese stuff, has been doing that for years, Nathaniel, and has written horoscope prediction. Amazing. Nishkal in India writes, it's all written in India, all that Indian astrology, it's all from India. It's not made up, it's not scammed in any way, shape or form. And we have Annalisa, who's worked with me for a very long time as well. Should just tell you, her moon conjunct my sun. Jacqueline, who's worked for me, with me for 25 years now, her moon conjunct my sun. Some wonderful actions with these people, but obviously it's a big responsibility, and how the business has been, it just is no longer working. I'm afraid it's not working, and I think this is making me feel low. It's driving this sense that I've worked so hard, that the rules keep changing. You keep trying to do things. There are other people on YouTube particularly who get a lot more views than me now, that didn't used to get those views, because they used to say, will you please subscribe to my channel? And me being the ultimate polite Englishman, didn't want to do that. I didn't want to seem pushy. And of course, they've got loads of subscribers now. And of course, when their videos are released, those subscribers may not bother looking anywhere else. So I've been a bit naive, if I'm honest, because we live in a real world where you have to be a bit more honest about the realistic side of life, and it's not all about just being decent. It is about balancing the books. It's looking after myself. It's finding better balances all round. So that's what I hope to be achieving as we come to terms with this situation, and all the good stuff I'm taking and the medication from the consultant kicks in. I'm hoping that we can do more stretching, more exercise, more walking. Had a few walks in the last few nights, not last night, but on the crutches, and it's just great. It's such a buzz to get outside, experience the wildlife, hear the sounds, interact with people, go for a couple of pints as we did on Saturday, which was lovely. People were really pleased to see us. But I've got to be honest with you, it has been absolute torture. But as I said, I'm seeing this as being a real gift to grow, to see how it is for other people, to adapt my life. And I have also got the other gift of the most amazing person I could possibly imagine has come into my world. And we have such an equal relationship. And we were in the kitchen this morning. I struggled my way down there, and I was ticked off. I'm just trying to think what I was ticked off for. I was ticked off for something. And we just spend the whole time laughing, doing lots of impersonations. I do Trump quite well. The biggest, the best world, the biggest, the best war in the world. The biggest, the best, the world. So I won't do him again. That was really not very good. can do Tony Blair quite well. Yeah, people, great. New Labour, Britain. I'll leave it out, Gordy. Love doing impersonations, so we spend a lot of time, because Elisa got her degree in politics and drama, so she's a very gifted actress and can do lots of impersonations. We have all these different characters. We spend all our time laughing. We've kind of got to, well, I've got to grips with me. It wasn't her had the issue, it was me had the issue with the age difference, because I just thought, why would you want to be with an old crock like me? And we just cheer each other up, and it's just fantastic. I've got also the most amazing group of people who help me with my business. I've got about 5 friends who've just been with me through thick and thin. Jill Barr, Jacqueline Chenhall, Pete Ward, Tracy Steptoe, Mark Yend. These are people who've been with me for years. Jill since I was 5, John O'Leary since I was 11, Norman Smart since I was about 15. These are friends I really treasure. Tracy I've known for 35 years, Jackie 28 years, Mark for 30 years. So for me, if I form a friendship with people, or we have great colleagues, because I don't like it when people say, well, I like working with you. And I said, you don't work for me, you work with me. And also this wonderful group of people that we've got to know through Facebook. And Jackie has just been amazing in supporting me. She went to America, went to Memphis, and also she had a most amazing time. And she also went to Nashville earlier this year. And she's come back, and I've obviously become ill. And to be honest, she's the one who really says hi to everyone. Whilst I've been like this before, I used to do a lot more of it, but my hands are now so sore that using the mouse has just precluded it completely. And there's so much effort that goes into what we do. There's also our Serbian friends. So there's Zlatibor, who was the first Serb that reached out to me about 7 years ago, a genius person. His brother has worked with us full time now for about 5 years, Velibor. Velibor takes the videos I do and puts them into the format that you see, the kind of newsreader format, which we're now realizing that perhaps not everyone particularly likes, that people want it a bit more hand casted. So we might have to rethink that, but he's absolutely a diamond person. And also we've got Demir in Serbia, who lives in Belgrade, is just so intelligent. And he built the app, the Horoscope Ace. Amazing people in this group. And I am just so honored to have worked with them, so honored to have written all these horoscopes for so many years. But the reality, I'm afraid, is that even though my work appears in a daily newspaper in Britain called The Metro, I don't actually get paid for that gig. And that's the reality of the world that we live in these days. It's become sickly imbalance towards workers. There's too much power in the hands of the tech giants. There needs to be a world collective view on interacting with Amazon, Google, YouTube, Facebook. They're all very positive in some ways, but they've become too powerful. And they are affecting the income, not just of people like me, but of big national newspapers. Local newspapers are shut in all over the place in Britain. It's absolutely terrible. Journalists are losing their jobs all over the place. Technology is great. It connects us. So Jean, my dear friend in America, or the people I speak to in New Zealand or Australia, or in the Philippines, loads of people there, loads of people in Hungary, Bulgaria, from Serbia, from also Croatia, Canada, North America. It's just absolutely global. Loads of people from Scotland, Wales. It's just brilliant. So many people. So that's the upside of Facebook. But of course, Facebook makes it harder and harder for people to find what we publish, because they want us to pay to reach you. And it's just all become a tremendous grind, to be honest. And so you're spinning 1,000 different plates, trying to keep it going. And it's just reached the point of total exhaustion. So Jean's saying, please don't give up. I mean, Jean, thank you. That's so lovely of you. I'm not going to give up, but I think I need to obviously at this stage just focus on my health. We're limping along with the business. It isn't making enough money to cover everything. So some money's coming out of savings basically to keep it going. But we are going to be trying to change it. And what I want to do is make it more about real astrology, about draconic charts, about directions, about secondary progressions. And I should tell you, my secondary progressed sun is 1 degree. This is the second piece of information that I've not shared that's changed this year. It's 1 degree in Aries. So obviously, as Saturn swept into Capricorn on, I think, the 17th of December last year, it squared up to my progressed sun. It's a real difficult aspect. And of course, Saturn is retracing its steps now. So that's going to start to activate that again. But of course, the sun, the progressed sun, is on Chiron. So Chiron has moved into Aries. So the two big changes this year, sorry if I've completely digressed. So the two big changes this year have been the fact that Uranus has gone into Taurus on a temporary basis for 6 months, and that Chiron has moved into Aries. So Chiron, the wounded healer, sat right on Aries. So you can imagine when Chiron and the sun get together, it can be another breakdown. It's a need to rejuvenate ourselves, because the sun is at the center of everything. Now, it just so happens that in my natal horoscope, this will be in my 5th house, which is all about creativity and love. So there is an argument that that's in some ways linked to the connection with Elisa, but I think it has had a detrimental effect on my health, to be honest. So all this stuff that's gone on for years, not sleeping properly, working very, very hard, vegetarian for 35 years, but not eating, not aware at that time because there wasn't the internet about things like B12 and fats, which I was missing out on, so became very run down, suffering with migraines, take medication, not getting the sleep problem sorted. So years and years and years of not sleeping properly. And then just when we think it's all going to turn around because of this magical relationship, then obviously this rheumatoid arthritis comes in. So it's a big lesson to me about, realizing that life is very fragile, that we have to keep working at it. We have to keep working our inner dimension. And the frustration that I definitely have had, I've got to be honest with you, I have had issues with frustration in my life because of losing my dad so young, through an identity issue I feel I had, because we lost our dad, we lost our business, we lost our house. We were moved into a very, very rough area where I was picked on because I was considered to be posh and also Catholic as well. So there's all that Catholic stuff. And a family that was very matriarchal. And there are two major people in my family that I miss so much. And beyond my dad, who I love my dad just so much, I can't tell you the loss that inflicted upon me. And not being able to talk about it, I was just told to shut up all the time. Shut up, shut up. It wasn't a popular subject. But I miss my auntie Hilda hugely, who died 28 years ago. And I miss my auntie Lily, who died about 4 years ago, who was an amazing person. Air signs. My uncle Percy, all from that side of the family, air sign. He was an executive at Lloyd's of London, the insurance brokers. Aquarius, Libra, Gemini. And these people, you could talk to them. On the other side of the family, it's they're not so open. It's kind of inward. It's grudge bearing. It's not airing issues. It's not clearing things up. Someone like me can be, imagine, a sensitive Aquarius. I just want things to be cleared up. I'm the first person to say when I screw up. And of course I do often. But things have been held on, moods, assumptions, prejudice, really not nice stuff around the family atmosphere for years. And I think we've got, my relationship, as I say, my son is absolutely superb. He's met a beautiful person. They're so happy. It's just fantastic. Elisa's a beautiful person, comes from an absolutely lovely family, and that's transformed my life. So all these great colleagues, great friends, and yourselves, amazing people that we work so hard at to stay in touch with. Because, you know, I do go online and I look at the videos of Michelle Knight and these other people, and they don't answer comments, and it's incredible. If anyone answers comments, I mean, they might do sometimes, don't want to slander anyone, but they don't answer every single comment. We answer every single comment across every platform that we're aware of. And if we have failed you at any stage in the last 4 or 5 months, I deeply apologize. It's not because we don't care. It's simply because we're all really struggling to cope with this situation. And my team have adapted, helping me. Jackie, as I said, has been incredible. Elise has been very much involved in just trying to protect us on an everyday basis. So that's the story of my life, really. A person who people come to with their issues, very sensitive, quite a reserved person, but another part of me is quite zany, as you can imagine. I've actually got a thing here on the door. Don't know if I can find it for you. This might make you laugh. That a friend of mine, Emma, who's a hospice nurse, gave me some years ago. Can I get this off? I'm not sure if I can. I think we can get him off. Can we get him off? Yes, we can. So here we go. So I hope this sums me up. There we go. There is it. There we go. We got it. So I think it's saying nice person, wrong planet. I think that just about sums it up, doesn't it? But I love being part of your universe. And this is going to change now. I've decided I'm not going to be this person who hides away. I'm going to be out there. I'm going to tell it as it is. I love the fact when people come through on the videos, they say, you know, you don't say that Jupiter is going to make everything perfect like some people do. You're real, and yet you're also trying to say the positives as well. And I'm very grateful for that kind of feedback. I'm not perfect. I won't be everyone's cup of tea. Why should I? We're all different. We will have different tastes. So as you get to know me, you may decide that I'm not your cup of tea. That's fair enough. But what I'm going to be doing is doing a lot more of these live broadcasts, telling you a lot more about real astrology. We've got to find a way to reorganize this business to make it continue. If we don't find that method of reorganization, it will die. Unfortunately, the revenues have just dropped so significantly. So we have to find a way. And that will be all part of the rebirth that I hope is going to come through from changing diet, taking better supplements, the love that's in my life, exercise, basically just being happier than I've ever been in my whole life, quite honestly, because I think I have been a very sad person at times, especially because of my dad, a very angry person at times, of which I apologize profusely for when I've fallen beneath the mark, because I get frustrated at the injustice of things. And that's something I've all worked through. And now I'm ready to help people again, help people in the right way. So there will be some live readings and also some prediction for you. Now, that might surprise you, because a lot of modern astrologers will say they don't want to talk about prediction because really all astrology can do is be a roadmap. We can give information, not necessarily definite outcomes. Well, of course, that is true, but there are other forms of astrology when we can answer direct questions, and that may be part of what I'm considering. We're also looking at, we've got a huge amount of text with the tarot that we're not using properly, that we could share with you more effectively. We also have runes interpretations that we wrote years ago that we've never used, because we've never had time, because the whole thing is like chasing around, writing all these words for daily, weekly, monthly horoscopes, and trying to do videos, then social media, and we sell our content to other websites. That's why you've seen, some of you may have seen me on other websites, and that's a way, but we don't get any money for it, not the money it's worth. if I sell my daily horoscopes to a small website, some of them will quibble about paying me £300 for a year. But other people do pay me higher values than that. But this has got to change. It's got to go away from words and be more about knowledge, more about interacting with you as the humble, flawed, not very well human being I am, who does terrible impersonations of Trump and Blair. I'm actually quite good, but obviously I froze. It was the pressure. And hope that we can forge a more intimate alliance. And if that means that there's 300 or 400 people that are interacting with me more frequently, rather than thousands of people who are at the moment, who basically I can't earn any money from, then so be it. But we are going to rebuild the website. It is going to change. And I'm just so grateful for your support. I'll be telling you more about those changes as I get fitter and stronger. But for now, there's a sincere thank you for listening to this. It's been quite intense, telling you about a lot of very personal issues, but it actually feels really good. Just like I really needed to do this to share that it hasn't been easy. It's been very painful, but I have been gifted these wonderful friends, wonderful team members, wonderful partner, and yourselves. And you know, as I said, as you get to know me, you can make your own choice of whether you want to connect more or not, and that's absolutely right. And I just want to thank you so much for all the kind supports. You know, the suggestions have all been incredibly valuable. And as I said, I need to work at the inside of me about frustration, letting go of things that haven't worked out, moving more into the present, and just starting to enjoy being with you, basically having fun. So you're going to see a much more light-hearted side of me, which my friends and my colleagues and my partner will know that I do like to have a lot of joking around. And so, but we can work in a way which I feel can help people better than just their zodiac signs. I do work very, very hard at it with the zodiac sign forecast. They are much more valuable than even the formal astrological firmament gives them credit for. Because if you're born as an Aries and you take Aries your first house, and therefore, for example, Libra therefore becomes your 7th house and Capricorn your 10th house, this does ring true for a lot of people. And there are so many different divisions that can go on in astrology. I love harmonics, for example. It's where you divide things down more and more. And actually even really very, very highly educated astrologers are by nature the most lovely, unjudgmental group of people. They really, really are. But of course, their problem, which I totally understand, is that you will get people who do my kind of work who will say very generalized things in a way which gives serious astrology a bad name. And I totally get it. For example, I went to a Christian healing conference 2 Septembers ago, I think, and it was in Birmingham. And I was saying to Pete and Jackie in the car that I'd been reading about a particular astrologer that most of you will have heard of. She does videos. It's been around a long time. And she was talking about Jupiter moving into Libra. And she was talking about it for Aries. And she was saying, look, you just, true love's going to come into your life in the next year. And that's the kind of stuff that serious astrologers really don't like, because that's very, very negligent, because who knows? What we could say is that Jupiter is about growth. It's about optimism. It's about education. It's about traveling within ourselves, or it can be traveling physically. So for Aries people, the transit of Jupiter through Libra was an opportunity to grow in their view around relationships. But it may have meant that some relationships would have ended because of that growth. Some may have started. But you couldn't say that in that simplistic way that every Aries person who are single is going to meet the love of their life. And that's what drives serious astrologers mad about sun sign astrology. And I totally respect them for it. So it's about being true about, yes, it can